Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being in attendance this morning to the Florida Outdoor webinar. Good morning, good morning. Thank you for joining the webinar once again, hosted by the Office of Greenways and Trails. My name is Gabrielle Stewart, and today we are featuring Kyle Simpson, Active Transportation Planner for Forward Pinellas, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, MPO, and Land Use Planning Agency for Pinellas County, Florida. Before we get into the webinar, I have a couple of reminders for today's presentation. At the end of the presentation, we will have a question and answer portion, so please hold all questions until the end. You can use the chat tab to write in your questions, and please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be available to view on the Florida State Parks YouTube channel and our website in the future. And with that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our guest speaker. Kyle Simpson initially became interested in trails through self-supported bicycle tours during his youth, including across the United States from Oregon to New York in 2010. Kyle has a master's in regional planning from the University of Albany and a bachelor's in interdisciplinary studies from the University of Central Florida. Kyle is responsible for development and implementation of the Forward Pinellas Active Transportation Plan, managing the non-motorized count programs and assisting in the implementation of bicycle and pedestrian projects in the Pinellas County, and also throughout the Tampa Bay region. So I just want to go ahead and thank Kyle for taking time to speak on our webinar today, and I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you now. So please go ahead and share your screen.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much to the Office of Greenways and Trails for having me on this morning. All right, so as said, I am Kyle Simpson and with Forward Pinellas, and I'm going to talk about how metropolitan planning organizations, MPOs, fund trail projects. Just starting off, I want to give a little context. When I say trails, I'm coming at it from a more urban context. Pinellas County is one of the most urbanized counties in the state of Florida, and so we come at it from a more multi-use paved trail perspective versus more of like a nature trail, if you will. So today I'm going to cover a little bit of history on why metropolitan planning organizations were initially formed, what we do, kind of our core programs, our bread and butter, trail funding opportunities that we have, and how we help advance trails throughout the county and Tampa Bay region, and then opportunities for public involvement throughout the whole planning process. So setting the stage for metropolitan planning organizations, in 1956, President Eisenhower signed the Federal Aid Highway Act, also known as the National Interstate and Defense Highways Act. This authorized $25 billion in 1956. If you adjust for inflation today, that would be just under $300 billion. To build a 41,000-mile network of interstate highways. And the initial goal was to have the system built out in 10 years. At the time, it was the largest public works project ever undertaken in the United States. And the initial program had a 90% federal cost share. So what that means is if a highway segment was $1 million, the federal government would pay 900,000 of that, and the state would only need to come up with $100,000. And it initially operated kind of under a first come, first serve method of whichever state had a segment that they could construct. Federal government would be like, here's the money, and they would build it. So there wasn't as much kind of strategic planning, and it was kind of a race to try to get this done as fast as possible. As that built out, it was somewhat easy in the rural areas to do this, but as the interstate system started interacting with urban areas in our cities, some pushback began to form. So cities in the 50s and 60s were still struggling from the effects of the Great Depression of the 30s, and then during World War II, there's a lot of material rationing. So things like the road network, transit systems were kind of in a state of disrepair because they didn't have the personnel or the equipment necessarily to maintain a good state of repair. And with the initial interstate system, there wasn't much coordination between local officials and state highway departments on where these interstates should go in or around cities. This also kind of continued a style of urban renewal where areas were designated as blighted, and that allowed uh, the government powers to use eminent domain in the name of some slum clearance and urban renewal to construct these highways. So one of the most famous kind of activists of the time was Jane Jacobs. She's very familiar in a lot of planning circles out of New York City. So really, just to illustrate kind of what this looked like in Cincinnati. The image is 1955. You can see on the bottom left, that's kind of the railroad lines, which are noticeable in the urban form. But if you look at 2013, this is Interstate 75 as the main north-south uh, roadway you see there, but a huge change in just how much property had to be converted to construct that facility. Same for Providence, Rhode Island, again, 1955 on the left. And again, you have the railroad, which historically was kind of the larger, a little bit more disruptive, so to speak, on the urban fabric on the right side there. And then in 2013. So these facilities had a large impact on urban areas, and oftentimes in the beginning, there wasn't consultation from state highway departments with local governments on where they should go. So in the 60s, 1962 specifically, President Kennedy signed the Federal Aid Highway Act that set the stage for the development of metropolitan planning organizations. So this is a requirement that still exists under federal law. Each urban area in the United States with more than 50,000 residents has a metropolitan planning organization. And then areas with more than 200,000 residents have what's called a transportation management area. So it's just another level of coordination and review that's required for the larger urban areas in the country. This act also established the core components that we have to this day, which is a continuing comprehensive and cooperative planning process. It's called the 3Cs. And so that basically just means that transportation planning needs to build upon itself. It needs to be collaborative with all the players involved. So the city, the county, the state, transit agency, and the public. And it needs to be comprehensive. And that's why we have comprehensive planning. And this is also a condition that's attached to federal funding. A city or county can go out and build whatever they want, whenever they want. It's a bit of an oversimplification, but what I'm going to cover is the requirements for federally funded projects. So bringing that to our local level in the state of Florida, we currently have 27 metropolitan planning organizations. A few of them are called transportation planning organizations. It's just a different name for the same thing. Within the United States, there's over 400 of them. And within the state of Florida, we have multiple metropolitan areas with more than one MPO. For instance, in our region, Tampa Bay, Pinellas, Hillsborough, and Pasco counties each have their own MPO, even though we're all part of the same metropolitan area. That's kind of unique. Most of the country has one MPO for one metropolitan region, and we're actually, as a region, exploring a potential of merging the three MPOs currently. So we'll see what comes of that. Within the state of Florida, there's also 18 transportation management areas for those metropolitan areas that are larger than 200,000 residents. And really the requirements that come with that is a congestion management plan. So looking for ways to reduce the amount of congestion on the roadway network through multimodal options, as well as additional kind of reporting requirements with the Federal Highway Administration and Federal Transit Administration. There's also statewide the Metropolitan Planning Organization Advisory Council, and they serve as a forum for collaboration between the 27 MPOs in the state, as well as the Florida Department of Transportation, who we work very closely with. So coming down one more step to Forward Pinellas, we are a little unique in that we're the Metropolitan Planning Organization for Pinellas County, but we're also the Planning Council. And so we're actually, the Planning Council was enabled by the legislature, the Florida legislature, under a special act, and that grants countywide land use authority. It was in the recognition that Pinellas County is the most densely populated county in the state of Florida. And with that, special attention to land use planning is needed. So in 2015, they did the MPO and Planning Council operated as kind of individual entities, but land use planning directly affects transportation and vice versa. So in 2015, those two organizations were merged to form Forward Pinellas. And so we have a single governing board of 19 local elected officials, and those officials represent the 25 local governments that we have in Pinellas County, as well as our transit agency, which is the Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority, and the Suncoast Transportation Planning Alliance, which is the larger 7-county Tampa Bay region. So now I'm going to cover kind of the primary bread and butter programs of an MPO. So our long range transportation plan, that's kind of the setting the vision of where are we and where do we want to go. The priority project list identifies projects to achieve the goals and objectives in that vision. And then the transportation improvement program actually implements those projects. The Unified Planning Work Program is kind of more of the back end planning and making sure everything works well, and that we do planning studies or alignment studies to figure out where projects should go and how they should look, things like that. So I'm going to get into more detail of each of these now. So as I said, the long range plan is really the vision. It's where are we and where do we want to go? It has a 20-year time horizon. So we at Forward Pinellas just worked on adopting our 2050 long-range transportation plan. It was adopted in November of last year. And under federal law, these plans must be updated every 5 years. So it's an ongoing living document. It accounts for existing trends and conditions. So we kind of take a timestamp when we're doing the update of where are we now and what are the trends pointing towards. Trends include things like traffic congestion, how many people are using our trail facilities, crash data, things like that. We use that data to develop a needs assessment. So if we're not on track to meet a goal that we identified, so say we want to have fewer serious injury crashes, if we're not trending in the right direction, we'll identify need, that's an identified need, and then we identify projects to help address that need. And then finally, as with everything, it comes down to the money. And so we project out to 2050 expected revenue from all the sources that I will show you on the next slide, and try to basically pair up what money we think we'll have over the next 20 years and the projects that we believe we'll be able to complete with that limited amount of funding to achieve our goals and objectives. So over the course of the 20-year planning horizon of that plan, we anticipate having just under $5 billion of money come through our work program. The largest shares of that are federal and state funding. From the federal side, a lot of it comes in the form of block grants. And so that's oftentimes called formula funding. And it is based on a formula established by Congress in the surface transportation bills. Last time it was called the kind of had two names, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. or the Inflation Reduction Act. So that was the federal surface transportation bill. They're usually for a span of 4 to 5 years, and often in recent history, they've been quote continued for an additional year or two because Congress needed more time to develop the next one. Um, that funding, though, has stipulations on what it can and cannot be used for. So most of the funding has to go to roadway capacity projects. And so that's why you see that uh, just around 43% of all of our funding is for more auto capacity. Um, Enhancements and improvements is a little bit of a catch-all for things like you can improve the efficiency of a roadway, i.e., create less delay for people driving by adding turn lanes or doing things that aren't necessarily widening the road, but just make it function better. So that covers that. We have around a quarter towards transit. So that's both capital, so like buying buses, installing bus stops, things like that, and operations. Our bridges, we have a lot of water, just like the rest of the state. And so bridges often also include a bicycle pedestrian component through a trail or bike lanes. And then the active transportation projects at 2%, that number comes from the Transportation Alternatives Program, which I'll touch more on in a second. So as part of the long range plan, we also have an active transportation plan. So we actually adopted our first active transportation plan in 2020 in February. It was unintentionally great timing. And it is now, with our latest long range plan update, it's just now a component of our long range plan. And we used it to identify 10 priority corridors throughout Pinellas County in which, for Pinellas, through our funding, we would prioritize projects. And we utilized our flexible funding. So some of the money that we get through our block grants, we can use to kind of fund projects that the public has told us to prioritize through all of our outreach with the long range plan. And so we're flexing those dollars. It's around 80 to $85 million over the life of this. So again, this plan is through 2050. And this is outside of transportation alternatives funding, which is lower cost projects, usually under $3 million, and we have our local governments apply for those separately. So kind of like our long range plan, we look kind of wide view lens of kind of in a perfect world, what would we have? And this shows red is existing, a solid red line is existing trails that we have. A dashed red line is planned trails. Not all of, most of the lines on this map that are dashed are not, won't be built in the next 20 years. But again, it's looking at that long range plan. This is our eventual goal. And so kind of tying into this webinar, we do have an existing trail out to Honeymoon Island State Park, which is one of the most popular parks within the state park system. And so that was a great collaboration. It's a newer trail facility that goes all the way out to and on to the park property. But we want to better connect east-west in our county to help provide, say, residents in Oldsmar that would like to bike to Honeymoon Island to give them the ability to do that. So kind of looking holistically, we then need to prioritize the projects because we have limited funding. And so to do that, we looked at crash history. So the safety on our existing road network, specifically related to people walking or biking, the land use surrounding the corridor. So that can be things from like population density to, are there, quote, generators, meaning like, are there schools, libraries, parks, places that people kind of gravitate to and want to go to. And then also the connections to existing trails, bike lanes, sidewalks, things like that. We are working hard to close some of the gaps that we have in our bike and trail network countywide. And so that's looked at favorably. And then from a accessible and comfortable scale, trying to get at a really kind of scientific measurement of, does it feel comfortable to be on the facility we're building? And so kind of the industry best practice right now is looking at level of traffic stress. And so previously you kind of said, if there's a bike lane there, check. But now level of traffic stress looks at, well, is the bike lane on a street with a speed limit of 25 or 55? Because, that between that range, you're going to have some people would be comfortable on 55, but a lot of people would not be comfortable on a bike lane on a street that has a speed limit of 55 miles an hour. So the level of traffic stress accounts for kind of the characteristics of the facility and what surrounds it. So putting all that into a ranking, we weighted it out and identified the 10 top ranking projects throughout the county. And we also have to consider we call it geographic equity or parity, making sure that we're programming projects in the north, central, and southern part of Pinellas County. And so we grouped 3 buckets for kind of 5-year increments when we were able to program that funding. So once we have kind of the goals identified and the long range plan and our active transportation plan, the priority project lists are the next step. So we have 2, the multimodal project priority and the transportation alternative priority list. Projects that get on these lists, they remain on the list until they're completed, they're open to the public and they're done. And both of these lists are updated annually. On the transportation alternatives list, this shows the funded list. So both of them have funded and unfunded. For the funded, it just means that it currently has funding in the FDOT work program, which is a 5-year program, for either design or construction. So for instance, we currently have under design closing some of the gaps on the Pinellas Trail Loop. That will be a 75-mile loop trail around the county, building on the original Pinellas Trail, which was in a abandoned rail right of way. We're now on the kind of more difficult part of stitching it through kind of road and utility right of way, which in a developed county, can be a little more challenging than just a rail right of way. We also have sidewalk projects that our local government partners have applied for, as well as formal connections to the Pinellas Trail out in western St. Petersburg. So these are all small, like I said, they're all $3 million or less. Our transportation alternatives program, we typically only get a few $1 million a year for all the projects on the list, so it is smaller. The multimodal project list, this is where like our highway projects will go. So locally, one of the big ones that was on here was the Howard Franklin Bridge replacement. And so that's a 8-lane interstate bridge over Tampa Bay. And so it was shared between Pinellas and Hillsborough counties because the county line is kind of in the middle of the bay. But the total project cost was just shy of $900 million. So just showing you the scale. That bridge will have a trail on it, which we're excited about. And so we're working to connect the trail on both sides of the bay. But I wanted to highlight each year when we update this list, there's the funded portion, like I said, that has everything that's currently funded for design and or construction, but then the unfunded list is what FDOT will use when they build their next work program. And so they start with number 1 and go down from there. And so the transportation improvement program is how a project moves from our list to construction. So like I said, when FDOT goes through and develops their draft tentative work program in January, they're pulling from our unfunded priority lists. And basically, if they have, say, $100 million to program, they start at number 1 and go until the money runs out. They then bring that list to our committees and our board. Once that becomes generally finalized, we'll work on incorporating it into our transportation improvement program, which our board adopts in June. And then in October, we also update our transportation improvement program to cover local government capital projects that they're doing, because the state operates on a fiscal year of July 1st to June 30th, but the federal government and all of our local partners operate on a fiscal year of October 1st to September 30th. So it's kind of why we have to update it twice. But the tip just covers all capital projects that are related to transportation happening within our planning area, which is Pinellas County. So to kind of try to summarize this in a digestible manner, how trail projects would be funded is we get the long range plan, looks at traffic studies, crash data, lots of public input, priorities from our local government partners. So it goes in, it develops a project that gets put on our priority list when FDOT is developing their work program. They pull from our priority list and put it in the tentative work program. Once the work program is adopted and signed by the governor, it then gets put into our transportation improvement program and is designed and constructed. So finally, touching on our unified planning work program, this is a little bit more of the behind the scenes work. It doesn't touch like physical construction out in the field, but it's how we plan for the projects that you see being constructed. Specifically for trails, we use the UPWP to fund alignment or corridor studies. Like I said, it can be challenging finding just where to fit it in within public right of way. So we might use an alignment study to determine that. And this program is updated every 2 years. So, how can you, as a citizen, be involved in this whole process? We do a ton of public outreach. We have a federally mandated public participation plan highlighting all the ways and means that we seek input from the public because it really is core to what we do. Forward Pinellas has a bunch of committees. By federal law, every MPO is required to have a technical coordinating committee. And so that's comprised of like local agency staff. So that means like the planners and engineers from our local governments, as well as the county and the Florida Department of Transportation, and a citizen advisory committee. And so like it sounds, that's made up of citizens, and those committees, as well as our others, report their advisory to our board. So any action item that's going to the Forward Pinellas board first goes to the committees, and those committees recommend action. They can either recommend the board approve the item, approve with changes, or recommend not approving an item. So, like I said, every MPO has to have those two. A lot of MPOs, including us, also have a bicycle pedestrian advisory committee, and they are specific to issues of walking and biking. We also have a large transit component because basically transit users, when they get on or off the transit service, are a pedestrian or bicyclist. And then we also have a lot of more niche committees with school transportation safety, our security task force, which brings together the 7 law enforcement agencies with jurisdiction over the Pinellas Trail, and then our Tampa Bay area leadership group that ties into the TMA that I spoke to earlier. We also have a ton of public meetings. There's public meetings for basically any large construction project that either we host or the Department of Transportation hosts. Those aren't always the most convenient. We do our best, but also understand that there's a lot of, it might not be your favorite thing to do on a Monday afternoon at 5:30. So there's also a lot of virtual options these days. I know when the Department of Transportation is doing their work program, they have a virtual town hall and website that you can go in and look at all the projects they're recommending for construction and comment on them. So we're trying to make it as accessible as possible. Also, every meeting we have that's open to the public has a public comment period. It's always at the beginning of the meeting, and so anyone that any member of the public is welcome to come and speak on any item um, during that time. So also, metropolitan planning organizations, the board is required to be representative of the composition of the county. So what I mean by that is if, say, the city of St. Petersburg in Pinellas County has about 25% of the population of the county as a whole, then it should have about 25% of the voting seats. And so if you have a local representative that sits on the Metropolitan Planning Organization, you can contact them about things that you would like to see either within your city that they can accomplish with their role as a city council person or on the MPO board. Also, just contacting the staff at your local MPO. We're always willing and eager to assist when people reach out. So that's a good avenue. It's also really good if you just have questions on why is this way. There's usually a story and reason why, and so we're always happy to connect with anyone that has questions or comments. So kind of summarizing all this, metropolitan planning organizations were established to and continue to help metropolitan regions identify, plan for, and achieve the community's vision for transportation. So we're kind of the overarching leader of the ship, if you will, of this is where the community wants to go, and we try to achieve that through all of our plans and project prioritization and implementation. We also facilitate coordination and cooperation between different stakeholders. So we work closely with the Florida Department of Transportation, Pinellas County, and all of our local governments to make sure everyone's on the same page. If a local agency, say a local city, has a concern on a state road that goes through their jurisdiction, we can work with the Department of Transportation to serve as the liaison on their behalf. And we also serve as a resource for our smaller local governments. If you caught earlier, I said we have 25 local governments in Pinellas County. A lot of them are, less than 15,000 people, so they might not have transportation staff that are on like work for the city. And so we're able to step in and provide technical expertise when they need it without needing to go out to the private sector for a consultant. Also, just wanted to touch on MPOs. We do not typically own, operate, or maintain anything. Like we help build a trail, but we don't necessarily oversee the operations and maintenance of a trail once it's built. We also do not provide instant gratification. The planning process is a long one, and it takes time. So just to illustrate again, we have a citizen committee that meets, they identify a concern of theirs, there's a gap in this trail network. We should really work to close that gap. So over the course of, a few months, we flush that through, we get it onto the next year, we get it onto the unfunded priority list for our projects. The next fall, when FDOT's working on their transportation work program, they might get it into the draft tentative. So then the following year, it moves up to our funded priority list. And so then once it's funded, we start preliminary engineering. And so general, what is it going to look like? Design construction plans usually have multiple touch points. We design it a little bit. Is this what everyone thought it was going to be? If it is, okay, let's go to the next step. Is it, do we need refinements, what have you? And so you can go from kind of a little template to working with the city that says, hey, we actually want to create a gateway as we enter. So these graphics are the Courtney Campbell Causeway overpass, which is now under construction. And it's a gateway to the city of Clearwater. Clearwater added local funds to do kind of an artistic design on the overpass, which was above and beyond what the Florida Department of Transportation would do. But that all takes time to flesh out. So again, we've gone a few years, and then finally, it's within our transportation improvement program. It's under construction, and it will open in a year or two. So again, that process often takes at least 10 years. It's important work, and if we don't have the vision, it doesn't come to the point of construction. But just a caveat that it does take time. So in summary, metropolitan planning organizations, including Forward Pinellas, we plan for and prioritize trail projects using a variety of funding. Primarily, we deal with federal and state funds. So federal from transportation alternatives and surface transportation block grants. And then also with the current infrastructure law, there are a lot of discretionary grant programs. What that means is it's competitive across the country. So we have to submit an application to get that funding, but there are new programs available for trail projects that we have gone after. At the state level, there's the Sun Trail program, which is a $50 million a year dedicated for trail projects across the state. And then also a kind of large option is incorporating trail projects as part of a larger reconstruction. So say, for instance, the Florida Department of Transportation is going to widen a road from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. They'll often 2 lane is often kind of more rural. There might be like ditches for the stormwater drainage, and there's probably not a sidewalk. If they're going to 4 lanes, it might be an area that's urbanizing, and so they might add sidewalks and add curbs and do underground stormwater conveyance. And so with that project, there's the option to add a trail along that road at a much lower cost than if we went in with a standalone project after the fact. So oftentimes FDOT will install trails as part of a larger project just because there's so many economies of scale by doing that. On the local level, in Pinellas County, we have a local option sales tax. It's called the penny for Pinellas. Some of it goes to transportation, but it also goes to things like libraries and parks and emergency services, things like that. But it is our primary local funding source for trail projects. And then overall, MPOs serve as kind of the regional partner and champion. We help define and establish the regional vision for our transportation network, including trails. And then we work to help achieve that vision through planning, bringing all the stakeholders together, and then working to fund the projects to get them on the ground. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, awesome, Kyle. That was so informative. I hope everyone that is tuned into the webinar is feeling, inspired to get involved. I see a couple hands up, so we'll get to the questions. I do have a couple to start with. So my first question is, what are some of the most recent improvements we can see in transportation due to the implementation of MPOs throughout Florida?
Um, so most of the MPOs that I noted in the state have been, established for a long time. And so they all have long range plans that they adopt every 5 years. I'd say I can speak locally.
Mhm.
Some of the big trail projects that we have coming online is the Howard Franklin Bridge trail. That one was, it took regional support to have that trail added on to reconstruction of the bridge. And that's something that I don't think would have happened without it being part of the uh, construction of the initial bridge, because it just would have been so expensive to go in and add a bridge just for a trail after the fact. So that one we're really excited about, and the connections on each side of the bay. And we're also working diligently to get the loop completed within the county, because that'll be really great. It kind of almost circles the outline of our county. And so we're working to complete that, but also through our active transportation plan, provide connections to the Pinellas Trail Loop. Kind of think of it as um, when you're driving, the interstate system is kind of long distance. There's not a lot of, there should be no stops, it's for that regional traffic. And then you have local streets of varying sizes that tie in, and they each kind of serve their purpose. With bicycle infrastructure and trails, you have the same thing where Pinellas Trail Loop is kind of our interstate for walking and biking within the county. And then we have local trails that provide access from someone's home to that larger regional facility. So we're kind of looking at building out our active transportation network kind of with that frame. So.
Okay, awesome. I see McDaniel. I see your hand. You have a hand up there. Did you want to include something?
Yeah, can you hear me, Kyle?
Yep.
Hey, Kyle, this is Mike McDaniel, Heartland Regional TPO. I think I met you last year at the AMPO conference in Albuquerque. I don't know if you remember me, but we had a short conversation.
Nice to hear from you again.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed your presentation today. I had a couple of questions as it relates to your committees, because
Mhm.
as a bigger MPO, you guys have a lot more committees than we have. We have citizens and technical and then our board. And you
Mhm.
guys have quite a few committees. Could you go back to that slide if you don't mind that
Yep.
lists them all? And then could you tell me like how often they meet? Because there's quite a few.
Yes. So the top three meet almost monthly. So
Okay,
these three report to their advisory to the board. And so basically anytime we have a board meeting, they
mm-hmm.
meet beforehand. The School Transportation Safety Committee and Pinellas Trail Security Task Force, they meet quarterly.
Okay,
Um, and on the related topics. The Planners Advisory Committee, this is specific to the land use component, so the Pinellas Planning Council side of our agency,
gotcha.
and they
Yeah.
advise on, because our for Pinellas board also does like countywide land use map amendments and things like that. So it's not an MPO function
Mm-hmm.
necessarily, but yeah, so that's what that. Um, I believe the local coordinating board is quarterly, but I don't know for sure on that one. I apologize. And then the TMA leadership group, that's regional. And so they're meeting more frequently now because we do have the ongoing discussion on the merger of the three MPOs within the region, and including we recently brought on a consultant to lead that discussion. And so they meet, I think this year, say 5 or 6 times, but usually it's 3 to 4 times a year.
Okay, cool. And I just have one more question.
Mhm.
Can you go to the slide where you talk about your priority projects? I was just curious to know, like, some of the big projects, like the Pinellas Trail and the Pinellas Trail Loop. Do you
Mhm.
know, like, offhand? I mean, it's not in this table, but like, what year they were on the priority project list compared to like, are they funded now? Just how many,
Yep.
what's the lag time? Because some of the major projects, as we know, with the
Right.
construction cost increases, are
Mhm.
like taking a really long time to get implemented.
Yes. So the Pinellas Trail Loop is broken out into phases. So this is actually on our transportation alternatives list.
Right.
And we have so phase three, which is I want to say this is say they're like 2 mile segments roughly. And so they're funded for construction under the Transportation Alternative Program. But under the multimodal list, yes, I only showed you 1 to 6 on our unfunded list, but I believe we have over 30 projects on there right now, and the ones near the bottom are kind of they've been on there a while. So we're actually considering not having a call for projects this year to try to move projects through the list, because it is an issue we've had here as well, with most of the new funding that came from the recent federal infrastructure bill has been kind of just eaten up by construction cost inflation. So yeah, it's a challenge that we see. One thing that I didn't highlight that I guess getting to that point is, after our recent long range transportation plan update, we're moving forward with doing a annual line item of basically pulling off the top $3 or $4 million for us to hold back to supplement FDOT resurfacing projects. So when the state goes in to repave a state road, say through a city, oftentimes the state would try to incorporate other improvements like adding a crosswalk or something like that. They've had challenges doing that as frequently lately, just with the construction cost inflation. So we're holding back funds that we can use to supplement. So say if they're resurfacing a project and the local government said, we want a crosswalk here, and FDOT says we're not able to pay for that at this time, then we can use some of that $3 million to pay FDOT to incorporate it as part of the project. So it's a way we're kind of trying to, get more done with the projects that are happening.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Mike. I don't see any more questions in the chat. So we can go ahead and wrap up the webinar. Thank you again, Kyle, for your presentation. This was a great informational webinar. If anyone here is not yet subscribed to our monthly webinar, you can do so on our website. That's floridadep.gov/OGT. And next month, we will be learning all about the Legacy Trail with Megan Edel, Manager for Sarasota County Parks, Recreation and National Resources, Natural Areas, and Trail Division. If you have any questions or feedback about today's webinar or the Outdoor Florida webinar, please feel free to email us at officeofgreenwaysandtrails@floridadp.gov. Thanks again for joining, and we'll see you next time. Thank you again, Kyle.
Thank you.
Have a great one, everyone.